Hey everybody, it's Ms. Ladd again, and here with another lecture from code.org for AP Computer Science Principles. We are on Unit 5, Lesson 9, Traversals Explore. All right. So you remember how we kind of like used arrays like we put like a sticky note inside of the first item, etc., all the way through. This is what it looks like in code, right? Lunch food, nachos, pizza, soup, stir fry, right? We can see nachos, pizza, soup, stir fry. And these are all lists, right? I call them arrays just because that's my background, that's where I came from. But when I say array, you say list. Array? All right. So an array is a list. It's just the technical name for it, if you want to think about it like that. So lists can contain different types of data, including numbers and strings. So here we have like 3, 5, 10, and 7 in our array or list of numbers, or scores in this particular case. All right. So today we're going to write down on a sticky note, write down the following list: 77, 85, 89, and 65. You're going to want to save this as a variable, save it as temps. We're going to do this all kind of old school by hand, no computer stuff involved. Although we will be writing code, and I will say run a program, we're going to do it physically. All right. So what if I want to know if a value is in a list? With a partner in the class, you should be discussing the method of which you would use to look for an item in a list. You're going to want to write this down in your digital journal. All right. You, as a human being, you'd probably just look at the list and find it at each one, and then go until you found the correct one. Right? Not hard. Computers are doing the same thing, basically. We're going to use a for loop to iterate through a list. So here's an example of a for loop. So here we have I for iterator or initializer, either one, or index even, right? All those ways that we can remember that this is, while this variable doesn't have to be named I, it is typically named I. Okay. And we usually start with 0 because we're going to iterate through a list or an array of items. Either way, starts with 0 because that's where computers start counting, right? So as long as I is less than the length, we're going to have valid indices. We're going to add 1 to I every time we go through the list, right? Here's our comparison. As long as I is less than the list length, then we're going to iterate through. All right. So replace the word list with the name of your list. So the name of our list is temps. And so we're going to replace list with temps. So you can see lists is no longer here, and it says temps instead. Right? And we know that this is 0, 1, 2, 3. These are the indexes for temps. And if you recall, dot length is 4, right? So as long as I is less than 4, right? This is the length of our temps array or list. Then we want to keep iterating through the loop. That means that we can grab each individual index by its indice. Okay. To access each element in the list, we're going to store it in a variable inside of our for loop called element. And I is going to be basically whatever value I is currently. So the first time we go through the loop, I is 0, and so forth. So hopefully we'll see this process evolve. Okay. So I'm doing this console.log here, just so like if you want to find out what the value of the element is, then you can send it to the console. So here's our temps 0, first time through the loop, right? So what is the index of temps or I should say, what is at index 0 of temps? 77, right? So it's going to basically go back, say, hey, this is 77, and it's going to store it in the variable element. Same thing here, right? What's the value of this guy, right? The variable I increases after all the code in the loop has run. So I'm kind of going to go through that same process. I plus plus. Now I is 1, right? Here we are again. Same thing. I think I kind of gave you the answer to the question. So here's temps 1. What is temps 1? Its value is 85. And that's what's going to get stored in the element. Okay, same thing again, right? Now the value of I is 2. So the next time we go through the loop, right? I is technically 2 right now, right? So the variable element currently has the value of 89 because I is 2. Yeah, I skipped ahead. I gave you the answer. That's all right. You get the idea, right? So element is worth 89 because, or has a value of 89 because I is 2. Yep. And once again, we go through this process, runs after all the code has been run. So basically at the end of the for loop, I plus plus, I is 3. Super important, I is 3, right? So now let's ask this question, is 3 less than 4? The answer is yes. 3 is less than 4, therefore we're going to go through this loop one more time. All right, so here we are, temps 3, right? The variable element currently has a value of 65 because I is 3. I gave you the answer right away. Okay. So here's our temps 3. That has 65, right? We store it in the value of element. And again, we increment this code after everything has been run. Now I is 4. Is 4 less than 4? No. So we stop doing the loop. So we are able to access each item in a list by using a for loop. We can use a while loop also, but it's structured a little differently. For loops are kind of the gold standard of loops because it's all sort of self-contained. And when we iterate through a list of items, or basically we look at each item one by one, we are doing what's called a traversal. So we are traveling through or traversing through a list one element at a time. Okay. So let's look for 89 in the temps list. And in order to find that number, right, how would you find which index had that number? What would the console.log read after this loop is complete? Let's check it out. Console says, not here for the first loop, not here for the second loop. Element found at index 2 for the third loop, and last but not least, not here for the last item. Now let's say I want to reduce the smallest number in my list, or reduce to the smallest number of my list. I'm going to store a variable outside of the loop, call it min. I'm going to set its value to temps 0. Then I'm going to run through this loop. The first one's always going to be the value of temps 0, right? But what if that's my smallest number? Well, if that's true, then this conditional statement will never be executed, because as long as the value of element is, if it's greater than min, this is never true. So it won't ever store min as element, as whatever the element value is, right? So that's an easy way to go about reducing the list to the smallest number. Say, hey, what is the smallest number in this list of items? It's whatever is stored in min. All right. I've given you a list of number sets, and I've given you a list of animal sets. I'll include the video in the description link below. If you're with a partner, you would have that partner, your partner, write out that list. I think that's on the next slide. Let's take a look. Right. There it is. So what would I do if I want to find the smallest number in the list? What might I do if I want to find the biggest number in the list? What might I do to reduce the list to only the biggest or smallest number? Write this in your digital journal for lessons 9 through 12. All right. So here's our global variable. This is basically something that is outside of the for loop and probably outside of a function. But we're going to set the value of min to temps 0, right? And that way, if temps 0, well, it's never going to be less than temps 0. They're going to be the same. So element and temps, or element and min will be the same. Does that trip this off? If element is less than min, are two items that are the same value? Is one less than the other? No, it is not. So this will never trip off for the first item. But let's say the second item in our list is smaller than the first item. Then we're going to want that to reset the value of min to whatever the current value of the element is. Then we check the next element, then we check the next element, then we check the next element. And this code, this min value only gets reset to the value of element when element is less than min. Okay. So here you are. I want you to partner up. If you're viewing this remotely, you can use my random list numbers that I've put down in the video description. Pick one of the 4 sets and try to go through it slowly. I know I read them out pretty fast, but you can hear one, pause, hear one, pause, hear one, pause. Or you can just okay, here's the whole list, and then go through the process of running the for loop for yourself. All right. So store the global variable on a scrap of paper. This one's for maximum. So we can find the biggest number, right? We just went through finding the smallest number. Let's find the biggest number. So we stored this global variable named max on a scrap piece of paper. We can evaluate the statement max equals temps 0 to find the value stored in max by asking your partner, what is stored at temps index 0? Run the for loop, right? You're just going to do this not with an actual computer, but just you're going to be the computer. What is here? What is here? What is here? What is here? And then you're going to do the comparison statement and then set the value to max or not, depending on what the comparison statement is. Check with your answer at the end with your partner and write your code result or anything else that you learned from this in your digital journal. All right, then switch roles with your partner. If you ran the code now, create the list, and the other way around. If you're viewing this remotely, again, there's going to be a list of random animals that you can have via a video. Again, I will link that in the description below. So one partner creates a list of 8 random animal names and stores it in the list animals. Keep this list hidden. The other partner uses a separate scrap of paper to track a new list called Animals List A. All right, so change the name of the list in the for loop. And it says in the traversal machine, you are the traversal machine, to animals. Use the code to the right. So that's in this little faux sticky note to filter animals from the animals list to animals list A based on the conditional statement. So what is this conditional statement? It's just checking to see if the first element or the first letter of that animal's name is A. And if so, then add it to the list. If not, we're going to skip over it. All right. This is a video for you to watch at some point. So the key takeaways from this are that we use a for loop to traverse a list. As I mentioned, you can use a while loop, but most people use for loops because they're the gold standard of loops, right? They've got everything you need in one spot. You don't have to worry about finding where the initializer is, or if you've forgotten it, or if you need to add a counter, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to use a for loop. Each pass through the loop, the counting variable changes, usually by 1. That's based off of what we have in our third argument in the for loop. So that would be the I++, basically says iterate this or just add 1 to this. Plus plus is a shortcut for that. It's just the same as saying index equals index plus 1. Same thing, just a lot shorter typing. And we like to be efficient and be shorter in our typing. So once we know the element at each spot in the list, we can do different things with it, right? We can filter it, i.e. create a subset of elements from the original list. You just did this with the animals. Or we can reduce it, basically make it down to a single element. For example, the smallest number of the list, or for those of you running through it, the largest number in the list. Okay. So traversing or traversal is just the process of accessing each item in a list one at a time. And that's it for today, guys. I'll see you in class.